I am Moses, once a prince of Egypt, now a shepherd, and soon to be, well, you'll see. It all began with a bush that burned but was not consumed. God spoke to me, commanding me to return to Egypt and free my people. The journey back was long, but my determination grew with each step. I couldn't help but wonder how my people had fared in my absence. Upon arriving in Egypt, I found my people still in chains, their spirits nearly broken by years of hardship. I approached Pharaoh, my once brother, now a stranger, sitting upon a golden throne. "Let my people go," I demanded.
"And who is this God of yours that I should obey him?"
And so the plagues began. First, the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, turned to blood. Fish floated lifeless on the surface, and the stench was unbearable. Next came the frogs. They were everywhere. In the streets, in the houses, even in Pharaoh's own bedchambers. You'd think he'd have hopped to our demands then. But no. Lice followed, then swarms of flies. The buzzing was maddening, but not as maddening as Pharaoh's continued refusal. Pestilence struck the livestock next. The fields were filled with the carcasses of cattle, sheep, and horses. The stench of death hung heavy in the air. Painful boils afflicted man and beast alike. I saw even the mighty Pharaoh wince as he sat upon his throne. Yet still he would not yield. Then came the hail mixed with fire from the heavens. It was a terrifying sight, ice and flame raining down together, destroying crops and buildings. What little the hail had spared, the locusts devoured. They came in clouds so thick they blotted out the sun. The land was stripped bare in hours. For 3 days darkness covered Egypt. It was a darkness so complete you could feel it. Many cowered in fear, but still Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. The final plague was the most terrible of all, the firstborn of Egypt. I cannot speak of it without sorrow. Even now the cries of mourning echo in my memory. At last Pharaoh relented. "Go," he said, his voice hollow with grief. "Take your people and leave us." We gathered what little we had and set out, our hearts filled with a mix of joy and trepidation. Freedom lay ahead, but what trials awaited us? Our exodus had barely begun when we heard the thundering of hooves. Pharaoh had changed his mind and now pursued us with his entire army. Trapped between Pharaoh's chariots and the sea, despair began to set in. But I remembered God's promise and raised my staff, and then a miracle. The waters parted, revealing a path to freedom. We crossed on dry land, marveling at the fish swimming within the watery walls. Children pointed in wonder, momentarily forgetting their fear. Pharaoh's army followed, their chariot wheels struggling in the sand. As the last of our people reached the far shore, I turned back. With a great roar, the waters crashed down upon the Egyptian army. Chariots, horses, and men were swept away before our eyes. As the sea calmed, we stood in awe of what had transpired. We were free at last, but the weight of the journey ahead settled upon us. Our trials were far from over, but in that moment we knew that with faith and perseverance anything was possible. And so our journey continued towards a promised land and a future of our own making. The story of our people had only just begun.